Today we're going to talk about the path to proficiency in French. Proficiency guidelines are brought to you by the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Language, known as ACTFL. The ACTFL Proficiency Guidelines are a description of what individuals can do with language in terms of 4 skills. Those are speaking, writing, listening, and reading in real-world situations in a spontaneous and non-rehearsed context. Spontaneous means spur of the moment, without having to think about it. Just like languages that you already speak, such as English and others, you don't have to really think before you speak. Sometimes it's a good idea to, but normally we just say our thoughts as they come to us. This is harder in a new language when we have to think about what we're going to say for a while. For each of those 4 skills of speaking, writing, listening, and reading, the proficiency guidelines have identified 5 major levels of proficiency. From the most proficient to the least, it's distinguished, superior, advanced, intermediate, and novice. Those 3 lowest levels of advanced, intermediate, and novice are further subdivided into sublevels known as high, mid, and low. With these levels and sublevels, we can envision an inverted pyramid. Inverted means upside down. Why upside down? Well, the very lowest point, when there's not much knowledge at all, is novice low. This is where you guys will be for the first couple of months or so as you're learning French. Then you'll progress into novice mid. After that is novice high. Then you will advance to intermediate level, and hopefully on up into advanced and maybe even higher. Let's talk a little bit about the path to proficiency, what the major milestones are, and when you can imagine that you're going to achieve these levels. And one thing to keep in mind, it differs from person to person. So some people may go along the path a little bit more quickly, and some may take a little bit longer to get down the path. Novice low is just using words. Okay? So right now, you can say bonjour and salut and monsieur, so you're using some words. But we want to get where you can say words and phrases. And remember, this is spontaneous and unrehearsed, meaning, yes, you can study a script or a list of words and then repeat those, and that's a good skill, but it's not spontaneous and unrehearsed. Okay? So it's important to remember those 2 distinctions. By the end of 1A, French 1A, that's the end of this school year in May, you're expected to be able to be at the novice mid-level, that is, using words and phrases spontaneously and unrehearsed. Some may be a little further along the path, which is great, but ideally this is where you are at least. For novice high, the standard is using some single sentences, again unrehearsed and spontaneously. And by the end of French 1B, this is the ideal target for proficiency at that level. 1B would be next school year, 2021-2022. For intermediate low, this is always using sentences when necessary, unrehearsed and spontaneously. And this is the target for the end of French 2, which for those who are in 6th grade right now would be 8th grade. If you're in 7th grade, you'll be doing year 2 as a 9th grader in high school. And speaking of high school, hopefully you'll continue on the path to proficiency in French, and intermediate mid and intermediate high are the levels that you should attain if you take years 3 and on up. If you make it to advanced placement, which is known as AP classes, you can get to advanced where you're a paragraph level speaker. And this is where you should be to be able to pass the AP exam and get a 3, 4, or 5. Those are passing scores. Looking again at the inverted pyramid of the proficiency levels, you can see the basic descriptions of each level. So, as a novice, you can communicate with formulaic and rote utterances, lists, and phrases. Formulaic just means set phrases that everyone knows, like, hi, my name is, how are you? Those kinds of things, okay? And rote means that they've been memorized, okay? Intermediate, you start creating with language and answering simple questions. Advanced, you would narrate, so telling a story and describing in the past, present, and future. And you can see the descriptors for the higher levels. One thing to keep in mind with your path to proficiency that we just saw, if you're wondering about distinguished, which is pretty much speaking like a native person speaks, well, it takes at least 7 years of intensive practice and using the language daily in the real world to reach this level. Keep that in mind. Now, we want to talk about the 3 modes or ways of communication that have been identified by ACTFL. The first one is interpersonal, which has a speaking component and a writing component. The second mode is interpretive, which has a listening and a reading component. And presentational, like interpersonal, has a speaking component and a writing component. We're going to watch this short video for more description on these 3 modes of communication. So thinking about those 3 modes of communication, at the various proficiency levels, we can talk about I can statements, meaning what a student should be able to say they can do at any given level. So again, Novice Low is the first couple of months of French 1A when you really don't know much, so you can communicate on some topics with single words and practiced phrases, like you're already saying bonjour monsieur, for example. For interpretive, you can recognize a few memorized words and phrases, so if you saw salut, hopefully you'd remember that means hi. And then presentational is where you can copy familiar words or say familiar words from your notes. Okay? For novice mid, which is the, remember, goal for the end of 1A at least, you can start communicating using a variety of things. So you can read through these yourself when you're looking at this slide deck later at your own speed. Novice High, again, is our 1B target. So you can see that the proficiency is greater. You can do more things. You can understand and speak and write and listen more. And then, of course, again, by the end of French 2, you should be able to participate in some conversations, understand more than just the main idea, and write briefly about familiar topics using simple sentences. Let's talk about rubrics. Now, a rubric is a grading guide that a teacher uses, and the one you see here is the rubric for presentational and interpersonal modes together, and it can be for both writing or speaking tasks. The levels, by the way, are based on honors in the military of France. So you have the Légion d'honneur, which is the Legion of Honor. Next down is the Ordre du Mérite, the Order of Merit. Under that is Soldat, which is soldier. And at the very bottom is Recrue, which is a recruit, first starting out. You can see the I can statements for each of the proficiency levels that we have described using the French military honors. Légion d'honneur, I can complete the task, connect simple sentences, and use a variety of vocabulary. If you're able to do that, this is the grade range that you would be working in. For Ordre du Mérite, you're completing the task using memorized simple sentences and memorized vocabulary. This would be your grade range. Soldat is almost completing the entire task. That is what is being asked for you to do for the assignment, for example, or the assessment. You can sometimes use those memorized sentences, and basically you're listing vocabulary instead of using it in simple sentences. So this is the grade scale for that level. At the recrue level, you can basically just list words dealing with the topic of the task. And so your grades would be reflected in this area. Now, while most of your grade is focused on the communication goals, which are these I can statements we just went over, you can have some points deducted for accuracy error. Accuracy has to do with spelling, grammar, the words you choose to use, and the order that you put the words in a sentence. And you can see that if you make little to no errors, you wouldn't get any points deducted. If you have a few errors but they do not prevent communication, you might have 1 point taken away. And then you can see as it goes down with more points taken away, it has to do with how much your errors prevent communication from happening. The interpretive reading, listening, and viewing rubric looks very similar. It uses the same military honors, okay? But the wording of the I can statements is slightly different. So the rubric for the interpretive would include things such as stories, readings, infographics, videos, recorded conversations, and other things where you have to comprehend or understand what is being said or what is written. And you can see that the descriptors have to do with recognizing and understanding, okay? And you have most at the Légion d'honneur level, some, Ordre du Mérite, few at Soldat, and at Recrue, you're recognizing a few words, but you may not understand them in a context. And it has the same grading scale as the previous rubric. So, how far down the path will you choose to go? Remember, it is your choice. I don't decide at what proficiency level you are. You perform a task, and then I can tell you at what point you are on your path. But it's up to you to decide how far you will go. I'm here to help you down the path. Merci.